as Summer introduced us, it's a bit of a high-level panel, giving you a bit of a snapshot on how we got to where we are right now and what we're hoping the games industry is going to transform into over the next few years. Lots of exciting things happening in Pakistan right now, despite some of the handicaps and limitations that the industry have. There are a lot of studios doing some really interesting work, and we'll try and give you a very high level overview of what the industry is like right now. And then with each panelist, I'll dive into the kind of work that they're doing at their specific studios, as well as their opinion on where we're headed in terms of the overall industry and the kind of work that we're doing. So uh, what I'll very quickly do is I'll have the panelists give brief introductions about themselves and a bit about their studios before we jump in. And then just in terms of the flow of the panel, I'll start with a bit of a background or setting the context in terms of how the industry formed and what the key factors are in terms of the growth of the industry. And then I'll invite each panelist to jump in and walk you through some of the work they're doing and some of the initiatives that they've been involved in. And then we'll conclude with hopefully a diverse diverse list of things that all of us can suggest on how to tackle the problem areas and what are the sort of high growth areas in Pakistan. So hopefully it'll be a useful session for everyone. I'll start with Mehran Khan from VR Play. Mehran, can you just give a brief intro of yourself as well as a bit about VR Play?
Assalamu alaikum, Mehran, and I am an art director working at VR Play in Islamabad. I work from Lahore. So VR Play is this giant studio which makes games, predominantly works in the game industry as a content provider and as a service provider, but we also make our own games. Our flagship title, one of the flagship titles that was released some years back is Explotins. So it's a 2D game. It was released in Apple Arcade. Apart from that, we've also made Run Cheetah Run, and we have also made, before that we made a couple of other games, but that was a bit too early. So right now I'm working as the lead artist and art director on Lost Twins 2. And it's a small puzzler game, a platformer game where there's a small design mechanic, I don't think we need to get into that, but we are trying to push the envelope in terms of visuals for it and trying to make something good, I guess. And at the same time, we are trying to aim for the Steam platform and the Apple Arcade platform as well. So that's about it for the Lost Twins 2 title that we're working on. I don't think we have a release date for that right now, but we are pretty much into production right now. So it should be out somewhere next year. About VR Play. VR Play itself, like I said, is a giant studio. It does a lot of things. We do art outsourcing, we do QA, and we do our own development. And it's almost all, not all of the team is situated in Islamabad. There are a lot of outsourcing units. There are a lot of people working remotely, like me. I work from Lahore with VR Play. So yeah, it's a very big team and it's a very big family.
Thank you, Mehran. And like all game production teams like to say that the title will be done when it's done. So we realize that there's no release date right now, and we won't hold you to it. Moving on to Noor Fatima, who's a game producer also at VR Play. So Noor, I think Mehran gave a decent intro about the studio itself, but if you can share a bit about your own work and what you're doing there.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this event. It feels great to be part of these kind of events and seeing these kind of things happening in Pakistan. So I think Mehran has given a very good introduction about our company. I'll just tell you about myself. I am a game producer at VR Play. I started my gaming career like 6 years ago, and I started as a QA engineer. Then I got shifted to game development, and I work as a game developer for more than 5 years, and I worked on multiple games on different genres. And the last project I was working on as a game developer was Explotins. Explotins is our last So yeah, and now I'm working as a game producer. I'm managing the upcoming titles. One of them is Lost Twins, as Mehran told. So yeah, this is all about me.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll come back to those titles and the work that you're doing. Moving on to Qasim from Mindstorm. Can I call you a veteran or does that age you, Qasim?
Uh, it does age me, to be honest.
Veteran in the making. So it's a good mix today, but we have people at
Thanks
different
so much.
stages of their careers. But just to give you some background on Mindstorm, it's one of the sort of pioneering studios in Pakistan, especially in the Lahore scene. Mindstorm alumni have gone on to play key roles in other studios in Lahore and other cities as well. So Qasim will be able to walk us through some really interesting history of the Lahore game development scene, as well as the kind of work that Mindstorm has been doing. They've done a variety of titles and a wide range of work. So he'll have some interesting input. Please go ahead, Qasim.
Sure. Thank you, Shehryar, for this great introduction. So regarding Mindstorm started back in 2007, and the goal was to make PC games. And at that time, Babar and the team overall thought of pushing the cricket game. That was the first game that we pushed on PC. And the journey has been very different overall, and where we try to always push to the limit. Like, guys, what next? What next? And the first game that we pushed on PC, then going back to the mobile side, pushing for the mid-core titles. Then we did change the trajectory towards more casual games, and then we tried idle games. Right now, these days, we have different pods, and every pod has their own category they're picking. For example, few people are working on hyper casual, and few people are working on casual side. So again, the Mindstorm is a 100% product company. We don't do any services. My role is mostly into product, data, and publishing side. And again, we got amazing people to work with us. And right now, we are working with Line Studios as a strategic partner to publish our games. And every year, we are pushing new hits on the hyper-casual side. Now we are moving towards casual side to push for another big titles. So hopefully by this year, you see a lot of new games coming out on the top charts from Mindset side.
Interesting. That's a great intro, and we'll dive into that later for sure. So just a note for the people who've joined us, Shayan won't be joining us for this session, unfortunately. So we'll miss him in terms of his input from their studio side. But I think the panel is kind of interesting because, like I said, we have some of the people who are relatively new to the industry. So although Noor has 5+ years of experience now, but compared to, let's say, Mehran or Qasim, I think you have a very good overview of what's happening over the last 3 to 5 years and what happened before then when the industry was very, very nascent, right? And also the kind of work that, even though Mehran and Noor are both from one studio, VR Play, but the kind of work that they've done is very different. And also Mehran's experience in studios outside of VR Play is going to be an interesting part of today's panel. So I think just to set the context, especially for people listening in from outside Pakistan, but also from Pakistan, people who are new to the games industry, or people who are trying to figure out how different studios are carving their path in a very, very competitive industry. I think I'd love to set a context of what Pakistan offers to the gaming industry and how the sector has gotten to where it has, despite a lot of hurdles and problems. And then what are the things that some of these studios are trying to focus on to actually come up with global hits or at least commercially viable games, right? So I think it's very easy for people, even within the games industry, to say that the Pakistani games industry is very, very limited, or it hasn't really created world-class studios, or it hasn't created the equivalent of Angry Birds or some sort of global hit that is a household name, or at least is a well-known game, even if it's a hyper-casual game. But a super successful game hasn't really come out of Pakistan, right? And even when we talk about the content that's created out of Pakistan, even people who are within the industry, we always end up comparing ourselves to AAA studios, to some of the top games on the App Store or the other platforms. And there's always this feeling that the studios over here aren't good enough, and they don't have the capability to create these AAA titles. Although historically, if you look at our track record, yes, I agree. We haven't come up with, we haven't hit it out of the park with any single title. But I'd just like to remind people that the industry itself cannot operate in a bubble. And you need to realize that we're part of a larger society, and we're part of a larger ecosystem or an economy or a culture within which generally people don't understand liberal arts, people don't understand the creative industry. And even though jobs and professions are much better than they were, let's say 10 years ago, but even right now, if somebody wants to get into gaming or animation, there isn't a very high quality bachelor's degree in Pakistan that you can do where you decide, I want to go into animation and I will go and do a bachelor's in animation, or I will go and do a bachelor's in digital art. And here is a career path where there are, top 5 regional studios in Pakistan that I can join, and I'll spend a few years there, and then I will go to their sort of headquarters in the US or Europe or Singapore or something like that. That path is very much carved by individuals on their own who've struggled, swam against the flow of things and carved that path out. It's not a career path that is very easily visible to a lot of people, even within the industry, right? So when we say that the level of art in Pakistan's industry does not match AAA titles, you will still see silos, you will still see companies doing really good work. When they team up with partners outside Pakistan, when they co-produce something, or they work as offshore teams for AAA studios outside Pakistan, the panelists over here themselves have ended up working with some of the top brands in the world. There are 5 to 10 other studios in Pakistan. All of them have done projects on AAA titles, either partially or completely co-producing games with these companies, right? So the skill set is definitely there, the capability is definitely there, but the entire ecosystem right now is not mature enough to have a sort of a critical mass where one after the other studios are churning out games that are commercially sort of global hits, right? So you see individual studios really hitting it out of the park, but you don't see an industry at that maturity level at which we would like. But generally, if you look at the last 10 years trajectory, we're definitely moving in the right direction. More people are coming into this industry. It's a growing industry. More studios are opening up. The quality of work is going up. The partnerships cross-border are going up. The investments, just like Qasim mentioned, working closely with Lion and actually getting into hyper-casual games that are commercially really making good money was thought impossible, I would say, even 3-4 years back, right? Some studios were doing individual sort of attempts, but partnerships such as these, and partnerships that even Caramel Tech has managed, and some of the other studios have managed, they were even from people within the industry, they thought they'd be impossible to do in Pakistan, and we've seen this happen over the last 3-4 years. So I think generally it's fairly encouraging, moving in the right direction. Lots still needs to be done, but I think it's very important to understand the context in which we live and in which we operate, right? So another very good comparison for the games industry is a related sort of sister sector of ours, which is the software industry or the tech industry, right? And people who understand the tech industry in Pakistan, they know that 90% of the companies in Pakistan have been services-based companies, right? And the whole culture of actually producing original IP or creating original products, which is high risk, high return, even within the tech industry, has not been there. So whenever any companies were formed, whether it was fresh graduates, getting out of university and 2 or 3 friends get together, they start doing freelancing, they start doing services projects, and then those 3 people turn to 6, and 6 to 16, and 16 to 60. That's been the normal organic growth for 90% of the tech companies in Pakistan, and they end up just doing services-based projects because those are easier to do and they're generally competitive globally. But 90% of these companies have been unable to transition from services companies to actually product companies, whether it's SaaS products or mobile products or anything. Yes, companies do make products, but nobody has come up with a globally sort of recognized SaaS product, or nobody has come up with a globally recognized mobile app, which is not just commercially viable, but well-known across sort of multiple sectors, right? And that again is also a function of the culture we live in, right? So if you look at the tech sector and then you look at the gaming sector, a very similar phenomena is happening in the gaming sector as well, where it's much easier to actually train low-level people and just have them warm a seat as a services person for hire that you can rent out as an offshore team to studios in Europe and North America, and that's an easy entry point. Whereas a product is obviously high risk, high return. Whether you're in Pakistan or you're in America, the gaming sector is one of the most brutal sectors to be in. 99% of projects fail. So that 1% high risk, high return is not an easy decision. Even if you have millions of dollars in the bank, it's a fairly hard decision for studios to take. And the fact that studios in Pakistan have actually chosen to do that and found workarounds to do that, or co-produced or partnered with other studios, or had hybrid models like VR Play, for example, we'll get into that later, where a major chunk of their revenue comes from services, and they then sort of channelize that revenue into producing their own IP and their own games. Similarly, Mindstorm is on the other side of the spectrum, where they're not doing services and they're just focusing on one title and after another. But their partnership with Lion and their other partnerships have helped them sort of have a cushion and have a channel to actually publish those titles, right? So I think it's extremely important to understand the environment in which these studios are operating, right? And when we talk of the ecosystem, one of the most common things that's discussed is basically community, and how to build a community, and how to get the people who are even within this industry to be on one platform, to interact more with each other, even if they don't formally sort of partner on titles. Just the HR across multiple cities, primarily Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, but now also increasingly smaller cities are bringing up top talent. How do we get these people to sort of interact and talk to each other, right? So I'll start the community discussion with Mehran, because he's been active on that side on multiple forums as well. And Mehran, I'd like your take on, very candid take on the problems that we've seen in Pakistan in terms of community building, and the benefits of actually building a community other than just the game jams and the events and all of those. I think what's missing is that when you have a game jam or a hackathon or anything, that event in itself is credible, and that needs to be appreciated. But the 3 to 6 months between those hackathons and game jams, there's like radio silence, where everybody sort of goes back into their caves and starts working on their projects, and then they appear again, right? So even though online people are trying to build communities, but I'd love to sort of hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think my hypothesis for the problem that we're facing in community building is pretty simple, and I'll get to the benefits first. One of the biggest benefits, or the biggest problem that community building can solve in Pakistan, is the amount of bad information that's flying around right now at the grassroots level, where people are trying to enter the game industry. And I guess Qasim can agree with me here that most people have a very weird idea of what games to make, how to make, and how they succeed, and how to make the money from them. If there is a person, if there's a small team, or if there's a guy who wants to get into gaming, he generally, like you said, he would definitely try to go for a AAA game, and he would want to make a AAA game, and then he would just fail because he would later on realize that the sort of budgets that are required to make something like that is just not possible for anyone in the entire world. So one of the key benefits for community is the osmosis of information, of valid information, of what works, what does not work, what sort of tools are in, and what sort of tools are applicable for the sort of team that you are trying to make. So that's one of the things. But around here, one of the things that in terms of community, the main problem that I've seen, or the main, I don't know, I don't think if it's called, it should be called a problem, but the main key problem with the community building has been that there is a disconnect between the stakeholders and the grassroots level of people. You know, that guy who just graduated or has just came out of his 12th grade and just wants to know about graphic design, wants to know about 3D, wants to know about texturing. Because I come from art side, so I cannot speak on behalf of the coding side or the devs, but from the art side, there is just a lot of miscommunication or bad information floating around as to what the workflows are and what sort of tools they should learn. So like just the other day, I was talking to some guy, and he said that he switched from Unity to Unreal because Unity charges money if you publish their games. And I was like, no, I don't think that's really true for most cases. So stuff like that, community building really helps just solidify the information base at a grassroots level, and it helps the bigger companies actually with help the bigger companies with their hiring process as well. Like for example, any company right now who is into hiring is actually having real trouble hiring good artists and good devs as well, because the artists are still stuck in workflow processes which are like 8 or 10 years old, and they haven't been told, and they just don't go. There's just no platform that gives them an insight into how or what is in right now, and now what are the more faster processes that have been produced as of late in the industry. So I think these are the main benefits. And when it comes to the problem of creating the community, yes, like you said, yes, the webinars and the game jams and hackathon, they are good. They are really good, but there has to be no radio silence between these things. And there has to be a certain amount of community outreach as well, all the way down to the grassroots. And when I say grassroots level, I mean just going to at the school level. And obviously this sounds a bit too utopian, where you are asking people to go into corporate level people to go and have these initiatives where they go to the school side and introduce them. But maybe some other sort of initiatives can be done, like a smaller versions of hackathons or seminars like this, where you're constantly disseminating information about workflows to the general public in mass through a YouTube channel or something like that. But some stuff like that can help people get their workflows right and get their information right, and that is what will eventually feed the labor force in the whole community, and that will just flow upwards into the product design and product development itself. So that's my take on the whole community problem that we have right now, and that where and I'm not saying that there is no community. Basically, Pakistani community right now is pretty much a closed net system of network of people who are very well invested and very much interested and very well knowledge, right, in game development itself. But if somebody is not that much invested, as in he doesn't have a job or he doesn't have enough knowledge, but he's only interested, then he probably will have enough bad information for him to lose interest later down the road. So that's the problem that you need to solve. So if you need to take these more very, very well interested people, and you need to get them to be in a position where they're well invested and well knowledge, right? So I think Mindstorm and the Lahore, some of the companies in Lahore came together and made this Game Train program, which is trying to solve this exact issue, right?
Right. So let me jump to Qasim so that he can walk us through that and get his take on the whole community issue.
Sure. So regarding the community, is this like this year we started an initiative like let's build up the community of gaming side and let's train those kids. And based on my experience of the last one decade, 2009 to 2010 was a very good time at that, where like everyone, the new kid from the university wanted, hey, I want to be a game developer. But after 2012 to 2019-20, people were like, no, I want to go into AI, machine learning. That was trajectory. So this year, I would say, again, the game industry has picked up the momentum, and where a lot of people are asking, hey, how do you build up the game? How do you stuff? And the facts are, let me tell you, our Discord community, where we have all the students right now, I just checked, there are 55 students online at the moment on that community. So that means it's healthy. Number two, we have like 2,000 people on that Discord discussing, hey, can I get some help on that? So we are definitely in a very better situation. Number two is this, like, look at the ads. Back in 2009, you don't see any game ads. Now you do see Free Fire ads. Now the business has come alive, to be honest. And I'm just checking the data. It in 2020 overall, the downloads in Pakistan has doubled. That means more people are playing the game. So it's around like 19 million downloads every month. So this is really encouraging for the overall community, because if you start playing games, then you used to want to make games too. So that is a question that you solve in. But on the other end, I won't say the community that we need to build. It's also responsibility of the industry too. So we haven't got the big hits yet, as you said. So if you get a big hit, like for example, it's on the news, hey, a kid make a game and that is in top chart and he made millions of bucks. So now this does inspire new kids. Hey, why I want to be a game developer too. So I would say we need to make celebrities in our industry where they can actually, kids start seeing them. Okay, I want to be that guy. I want to pursue that career. So I would say we are into that trajectory, and I'm pretty sure that in coming 2 to 3 years we will get there. The reason, but back in 2009, it was the question was how to make games. That was a question, how to make games, because it was not easy. Now in 2021, it's really easy to make game, but how to make a workable business model out of that, it's pretty challenging. For that, back then you just need 2 people around, make a game, publish in the store. Oh, since there's not enough content on the store, you do get visibility and your game is a hit. But now it comes down to QA, to the live ops, to the customer support, to your acquisition, to the growth side. So they're like, the engineering side is only like 10% of the whole business model. There's like 90% engine that requires a lot of understanding, which we don't have in Pakistan, which we are trying to understand, hey, how to do that stuff. And that's why we have strategic partner. When we make a small game, like with the kids of 4 people, it seems like a game made by 4 people, but again, there's like 30 to 40 people working on that product to make it success. So as you said, like, since there's like 99% of chance of failure, so now we need to focus on 1%. And the reason in our community, people just, hey guys, it doesn't work. Let's go back to the other opportunity, like just go back to a daily work or to get a odd job in other fields. So I would say the community is building up. It has started momentum. Our Discord is doing good. If the teams, the companies are spending money, they're spending money on YouTube, on to giving you ads on Facebook. It's really encouraging. We have hits across the board, across different companies. That's also encouraging. And the last thing, what we need is we need more celebrities. We need hits on the charts to inspire these new kids. Hey guys, you can be the other one. You can be part of those games. And again, big beautiful games, and also make a business that can actually sustain that model overall of the studio. So yeah, I would say it go hands in hands. And regarding the universities, we are already working with these with university. Like we signed an MOU with Fast University. The reason I had a chat with the Fast Universities, and the kids didn't even know what game industry is about, and we have to give them an introduction. So we are going, think of this, we are going the Hello World project. So it's right now 2021 is a Hello World for the kids over here to understand, hey, what the gaming industry is and how you make game and what are the other areas that you look into. So I would say this year 2021 has been pretty good. It has momentum, and definitely it will go further and further from here.
True. That I think that's a great overview, and I couldn't agree more on the superstars and heroes coming out of not just as studios with hits, but even people, right? So even, for example, a phenomenon like Arsalan Ash, right? People who didn't know anything about either playing games or making games or anything related to that industry, they now know about Arsalan Ash, right? Literally every Pakistani knows about it. And all the kids who used to be getting scolded for playing games, they now have a hero to actually just inspire themselves for a couple of years more and try doing it seriously, and maybe even convincing their parents to give them a couple of years more with their hobby, right? So I think that's kind of important. And like Mehran was saying as well, I think that's a very key point in terms of your realistic expectations on what it takes to actually produce a game, right? Everybody wants to, and when I say everybody, they're mostly noobs who are just starting out. And like he said, there's a huge gap in what it takes to make a game and what they think it will take to make a game, right? So after your final year project, everyone thinks that they can make a Need for Speed clone or something like that, right? Whereas what Pakistan needs is basically more success stories like Flappy Bird, literally.
Yeah.
Like, one guy or two people on a weekend, or, spending 4 weeks on a hyper casual game, and that game making it to the top 10 on the App Store or something like that, right? So when you have such success stories, I think uh, a similar but simpler version is that you now have personalities in the freelance sector that have YouTube channels, that are influencers, and they bring on people who are freelancers, either on the tech side or the creative side or otherwise. And those freelancers are now making thousands of dollars per month through their freelancing skills, right? And that whole freelancing culture in Pakistan is primarily based on looking at those heroes, so to say, that, if these 20-year-old kids can make $10,000 a month, so can I, and then you have a huge supply of people coming in. Yeah. So I think in terms of the talent, Noor, before I ask you to comment on the community part, I think you yourself also were primarily a game developer, and then you switched to being a game producer, right? So there's a problem in the tech industry as well, and that problem is that Pakistan does not have product people. Pakistan does have software developers. We have all the other functions coming in. We have front end designers. We have graphic designers who are doing interfaces. We still have a problem with UI UX, which has gotten solved over the last 3 to 5 years now. But when you look at the Pakistani tech industry, the missing element right now is actually product owners and product designers and product managers, because 90% of the industry has been services based. You don't have people who've created, you don't have a lot of people who've created IP from scratch, right? And that's a problem that has limited the tech sector. So similarly, when you look at the games industry, the two sort of broad skill sets that you need are the art side and the dev side. And like Qasim mentioned, when a CS graduate finishes their bachelor's degree, they have all of these well-paying jobs from now over the last 3 years, well-funded startups and the existing sort of large companies. So as a CS graduate from FAST, LUMS, any top school, my choices are going and joining NetSol or a Systems Limited or a TRG or a Teradata or the typical sort of large companies, or now more recently it's joining something like an Airlift or a Bikea or any one of these new sort of truck it in funded startups, right? And that's where people go. They don't really know of a lot of large or well-known game development companies that are doing really good work and also paying the kind of money that the large companies are paying. So I think as a choice, a lot of people don't look into it unless they have a personal interest. And similarly, on the art side, even though people are interested in getting into games, but the demand for the kind of talent that is being produced is limited. So a lot of art graduates end up in ad agencies, or they end up in tech companies doing interface design or graphic design or the typical sort of mainstream work, right? And they don't want to go through the path of on-the-job learning and getting an internship or being a trainee in a game development studio for 3 to 6 months and then sort of figuring that career out. So I'd love you to I'd love for you to comment on your path from being a game developer to actually switching to game production, and the kind of talent that you're seeing in the local market, switching away from either art or development towards game design and producing games.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say something about the community building. We, as we are play, what we were doing, I think, and that is very important, was going to universities, giving seminars about what type of work we are doing, and that actually interests students. So yeah, that was a part we were doing before Corona, obviously. So that even when I was a student, people from VR Play, they came to our university, and we got to know about the gaming industry through them in Pakistan. Um, Talking about the transition from game development to game producer, yes, I totally agree with you. I mean, we do not find good game designers Okay, we as a game developers, we are the one who are designing game, coming up with ideas. So it's like talking about the animators, talking about the game designer, game producers. Yeah, we still need to work on that as a industry. So when I moved from game development to game producer, obviously my main idea was to just to know more about the industry and grow in the industry, because as a programmer, obviously we were working in an indie studio and I had a very vast knowledge of all the teams. But as a game producer, I get to know more. So yeah, we should do something to bring people in game design. Like we get a lot of developers, we have artists, but animators, even we have, if we're doing music and sounds work, we have to hire people uh, uh, from around the world. We do not get good music artists in Pakistan, we do not get good game designers. So yeah, there is one thing we are lacking in, so we need to do something about it. But obviously, if we get some degrees and programs, I think the universities need to play a major role in this, to come up with these programs. And we as a companies, we need to do more seminars and work on this, so people get to know and they can know, okay, game designer can be our job and we can work on that. It's a very interesting thing. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so I think, like you said, that we definitely need more degrees and structured programs. But the beauty of the games sector around the world is that anybody with grit and persistence can actually, and the passion to learn that, can get into it. And 90% of the people in Pakistan are actually self-taught, especially on the art side, right? So even back then at Trango, even Mehran is an example of this himself. Mehran didn't go to art school, right? And he's one of the sort of top digital artists in Pakistan. Similarly, you find a lot of, on the CS side, you have less examples, but there are tons of people who didn't necessarily do a bachelor's in computer science and they were self-taught and they got into game development because they were just persistent and they really worked hard, right? So I think people who are have that sort of inner drive to get into this creative sector and actually learn. Um, I know multiple cases where self-taught people have risen to the top of the industry, and several names at Trango, several names at Mindstorm, several names at VR Play. Literally every studio in Pakistan has self-taught people who actually performed better than some of the professionally trained people, whether it's somebody with a CS from FAST or NUST, or whether it's somebody with a art degree from NCA or BNU or any other place, right? So I think that's the beauty of the sector that I've always admired, that outsiders or outliers have, just by sheer persistence, actually ended up working at globally even some of the top studios around the world. So I think in terms of what games to make and how to actually create your own IP, broadly speaking, in Pakistan, there are two ways that studios are going about it. One model is the VR Play model, and some other studios do that as well. And that model is primarily where you grow a team based on services projects, because that's low hanging fruit and that's sort of guaranteed revenue coming in. And it actually has a safety net or a cushion for the studio where you're earning off of services projects. And once the revenue starts coming in, then you need the discipline to actually carve out a separate team for your own titles. And then that team is kind of funded from the services revenue coming in. And you have to have a long-term vision that you're not just going to be a, to use a crude word, a thekedar mentality in Pakistan, which is just like, we have 10 people and we have 20 people and they're people for hire, and we pay them $2,000 and we'll charge you $3,500 and just skim off the margins in a rent, some sort of a rent seeking mentality, right? So I think VR Play, to VR Play's credit, they've had the discipline to actually not just be a services company, but actually channelize some of that revenue back into their own titles, whether it's Lost Twins right now or Explotens earlier, and some of the smaller games as well, which were stepping stones for you guys. So on the one side, this model has worked for several studios. And on the other, you have the Caramel Techs and Mindstorm, for example. I'll come to Qasim later, where the other way to do this is to actually partner with a global brand or a publisher or co-produce something or bring on board talent from outside Pakistan and actually improve your quality level that way, right? So the reason people do that is that, as Noor, you were saying, Pakistan still doesn't have a lot of game designers. Pakistan still doesn't have a lot of high quality game producers. Yes, there are people here and they're improving every year, but the kind of experienced HR that you get outside Pakistan, because their industry is obviously older, it's more mature, they've got decades of experience under their belt. And even people with 5 to 10 years experience over there, they can bring so much value to the teams in Pakistan. So what I've seen is the ideal mix is where you have an offshore team or you have a remote team, and those guys have a sort of heavy contribution on the game design side, on the product ownership side, on the product management side, on the production side. And the offshore partner team in Pakistan is doing the content and the dev and the actual implementation of the gameplay and the core sort of game design that's being discussed, right? And doesn't usually happen in silos. I think a lot is learned from that osmosis. A lot of knowledge is transferred into the Pakistani teams. A lot of top people from here then go to those studios, learn the ropes and then do these joint projects. So I think that's something that a lot of studios have successfully pulled off. So starting with Mehran on this model where the services sort of revenue is being plowed back into your own IP and your own games, I'd like you to comment on that a little bit, and then I'd also like you to comment on the kind of skill set that's here in Pakistan and how you see local producers or local game designers gaining more credibility by chipping away with small titles which are successful. And then once they have a few titles under their belt, they'll be given bigger budgets by even local studios and their partners, and they'll be given more rope to actually work on more challenging and more ambitious projects.
Yeah, so I think VRplay did a very good job, and I think it goes to the credit of Mohsen Afzal, the CEO, that he has stayed committed to the vision of making VRplay a place where they can, where he can and we can, and the team can make their own IPs while make the IPs that we want to make, and not having to like just do services. So I don't think I mean, I'm not the CEO of Mohsen actually executed, so it's all to his credit, and he should be the one answering that question, I would say. But and this is something that I think other companies, I don't actually know any other companies who have done it, but I'm pretty sure most, I think Game District is also doing that. They have a similar model where they have a section working on the services model and then another set of team working on their own IPs. But I cannot say any for sure because I haven't worked with them. So yeah, I think this model really works in Pakistan because it's a good entry point and a really good source of stability for the team, because obviously games tend to fail a lot more than they should. So I think it's a good entry point, and most people should try to use that entry point to get into the business. However, the downside is that or the tough part isn't setting this up, but tough part is actually finding the balance of managing the day-to-day routine of a services model business, and all the while focusing on a product team, designing their own product, designing their own IP. And because it comes with all of its own challenges. So for VRplay, this has gotten up to a nice level. And the bigger teams out there in Pakistan, most probably, who also are trying, who also have seen success with this. But for any other person who is just starting out, I would recommend that to be wary of this main ditch, because this is sort of like this invisible problem that most people don't anticipate, because it sounds easy on paper that, okay, we'll set aside some certain people who are doing services and then we'll just make our own game. But what happens really is that the CEO and the core team who set up who started out the company, they just get too busy with the services model business and trying to stabilize it, and from the day-to-day hectic routine of that, and they do not focus on their own IPs. And when the IP team doesn't do so well, they end up shutting down that whole department because the returns weren't worth the time invested in it. So I think this is something that they should be really worried about. They should, before starting the business, should think about this through how we are going to manage these two completely different sort of companies inside one umbrella company. So that's what I think about that. Apart from that, in terms of skill set, I think in Pakistan has a huge amount of designers in the hyper casual genre. Because Mindstorm has seen a lot of success with that. I think Caramel, I'm not sure, but other companies, Game District also has seen a lot of success with it. So there is no denying that they are good at designing such games, and they're good at designing such games really fast. And they're really good at designing not just design part, just executing the whole project from start to end. So I think we have really good people there, and they can just. I have very little exposure with them, but they just have developed an instinct as to what works and what not works. So on the hyper casual, I think we are really good. So there's not much that can be done. And I mean, obviously they know. I haven't worked in their sector, so they know what improvement can be. I come from more like this small budget indie title genre, and there I can tell you that the problem is the same that I mentioned before. People try to aspire for games, try to make games which just aren't possible in Pakistan because of some core missing pillars. And these are pillars which cannot be fixed over a period of a year or two. And it will just take a much longer amount of time. And those missing pillars unfortunately aren't dev. Pakistani devs can make most of the games if they are told what to do, what to look for, or what to aim for. You can find people who are interested in the graphics stack, and you can say, okay, just I have you on for the graphics side of things, just keep looking into it, and they'll ask around, they'll figure the problem out. But there are just not enough artists to go about making a good animation, and animation is slowly becoming one of the Achilles heel of the industry, where even the local industry is hiring animators from outside of Pakistan to work on the animations in there. This is not because there are no animators, this is because there's just not enough animators to fill the gap. So for any local person, I would say that if you want to make your own indie game and that you want to release on Steam, so just look up other games like that. The game industry right now has seen so much division in terms of genre. There are so much smaller genres, smaller size games that can be made by a team of like 4 to 5 people. Where even there's a game called Death Door that came out just recently in last month, I guess, and that was made by just 2 people with some outsourcing agents working with them. So I think there are a lot of examples, and like Qasim said, that making the game is so easier right now that I would urge people to look into smaller games and try to make those first and make those really good, because there are really good smaller games out there. And mostly Pakistani people are not exposed to those games, I would say. They do play a lot of games, but they don't play the smaller games. And those who play them, they do not want to make games. They're just gamers. So if anybody who's listening to this and who wants to make a game, look into smaller games who have been made by smaller teams and try to reach out to them and just talk to them and just see how they did it. And it's mostly about just being wise with how you design it. And you can go into a phase where you're saying, okay, this is a small game like that too, and we're just going to clone 80% of it with some variation and see how it executes, and then move up from there. So that's my thinking. That's how I think about the missing skill set. I think one of the biggest missing skill set is in design, is in marketing, because I know there are people in the market who have immense knowledge about the numbers game that goes behind the financial side, but there are just not enough animators and VFX and look dev people to make to allow for too many or the right amount of games to be made. There are just too many teams who are stunted because they don't have the right amount of animators working with them. They have a designer, or they can get somebody to design for them, but whenever it comes to animation, they'll turn to some pre-baked animation, they turn to Mixamo, or they turn to somewhere else, and they just can't get enough. And the animators that exist, they are really like high-end animators, they're really good animators, but they're locked up inside of the VFX and the animation houses in Pakistan. So they don't want to work. They will not want to work with you. because you are just an indie team, so they probably can't pay them either. So what you should do is just try to find out game designs which are possible without having to rely on these problematic areas. You just work around them in design and then go and then make that game first. That's my suggestion for most of the indie teams.
Agreed. Yeah, I think well said, and we'll let Qasim sort of take a deep dive on that side in terms of the hyper casual segment, because that's opened up tremendous opportunities for small teams in Pakistan. And like you said, that you can limit the mechanics of the game and you can simplify it in such a way that it's still engaging and it still makes a lot of money if it actually gets good distribution. But like I said before, people need to make a Flappy Bird first, or a Ludo, or a billiards, or a carom board game first, even if it doesn't make any money. But as an indie team, you need to make a really simple game first, and then go to a like a free running game, and then sort of move up the food chain, right? Tone down your ambitions, ship something which is simple, even if it doesn't make money. You learn so much by actually throwing a game into the store and then hearing all the one-star comments about your game, and how the mechanics suck, and how the contents is not up to the mark, or it's something which is super simple but still engaging, and you're pleasantly surprised by how many people are playing it, right? So
Yeah, so
I think that's the key.
let me just sorry for chiming in, but this is something I also wanted to emphasize on about, for once again, for the indie team, not for the larger companies, but because there are people I've noticed people over time who have approached me, or who were making games and then they gave up on it. The problem is that which was said in the start as well, that it's about persistence, it's about failing. You are going to fail and you have to accept that and move on. Don't expect to be making your best game right at the start. It will probably come 10 years later. That's something that people just cannot deal with. So they expect their first game to be the best game, and it doesn't work out. They just drop it and just go do something else.
I think that's true. That's true for indie and small groups as well, and that's also true for studios, right? So I think my favorite example, although it's a bit old, but I always love quoting this, is that Angry Birds was their 51st title.
Yep.
They made 50 games before Angry Birds was a success, and most of those games were sort of commercial duds. They didn't make a lot of money from those games, and they were barely surviving, right? And we kind of forget that, and we think that they had it all figured out, and Angry Birds skyrocketed them into billions of dollars of revenue. So that's something that we need to keep reminding ourselves, and that also the persistence part is not easy in any industry, right? Especially if you're doing this. So I think before we conclude, I'd now like to jump to Qasim, and something that I'm also really interested in learning is that how has their experience been in terms of partnering with Lion and their team working with some of the top teams in hyper casual globally, and they've also had some commercial successes. So uh, from the little I know, the Mindstorm team has really skyrocketed in terms of their capability, and like Mehran was saying, you guys have now over the last couple of years really figured out hyper casual and how to optimize the production sort of for that, and the ROI on that is obviously very interesting, because you can literally make millions of dollars just from hyper casual, right? So if you can sort of, whatever you can share in
Sure.
terms of how your team learned and how they fared compared to some of the global
Right.
teams, and what was the feedback from the people at Lion and the other sort of international studios that you worked with?
Perfect. I think regarding right now, just to answer the other question regarding the model, the business model has evolved, by the way, in 2021. There are a lot of different models that come into place. Like one is services in QA, services in live ops, services in coding. Then it comes a model like the model we are in, like make a product and be an exclusive partner with an external publisher. There's another model where you actually just launch prototypes and you get charged for them, like $5,000 per prototype. This is another model. So a lot of models coming into place in 2021. Working with Line Studios, I think we always had all the skill set. For example, the engineering, the design, the art, the sound, everything, the data. The missing piece across at Mindstorm was the publishing side, and we had publishing expertise, but the challenge on publishing is like you have to burn a lot of money to understand. It's not like you go and test it. For marketing and for publishing, you have to burn money to understand. For example, I can give you an example for one of a game. We have spent around $100,000 on that game for testing, just for like in 2 months time. So just for like, what happens? So this is the budget typically that studios in Pakistan don't have access to back in 2009. No one has it. This is the whole budget of a studio to run with in a year time. So that is the challenge. And regarding when you go into this business, you need to understand it's not about making games simple. It's about the cost. What is the cost to acquire that user that I'm looking for? Hey, if I'm making Explodents, what is the cost to acquire a user? I'm like, my expectation for Explodent is around $10. If you launch this game in US, you will probably spend $10 to acquire a user. Now the question is, if I'm acquiring your $10, does my product has enough LTV, like enough revenue it can generate from one user of 10? No, it cannot. So now I have to add more and more features and monetization sense into it to make it viable. So the biggest mistake that the developer does is they don't even know what the market is, what is the cost for acquiring the user, and what is the goal that I need to hit for. So making the game is good, but launching it and making success, and there's a lot of mileage that you can cover. Again, on our end, working Line Studio, it has been amazing over. It has really what it does. It becomes a catalyst. It just expedite our process to the win side, so we can learn faster. They can have a publishing side that can help us to publish at a bigger scale. So either you go very slow, or working with these guys and they just pump in all the revenue, all the marketing side into it, and then just push the product to the top. So on that end, what we do is like we have our own ideations. We make those games. We have the budget to test those products. And for testing, again, what I give you an example is a small test example, like spending $100,000 for one test. And when you kill it, then you move to the next one and next one. When you have promising results, then there's a lot of other phases. Hey guys, we got product. Let's push in for more money, for more marketing side. And again, the Line Studio is a partner with it. It helps us on the publishing side. Once a product says, hey guys, the product is ready. It is sustaining well at X budget on daily basis. Let's pump it to Y. So this is where these guys come in. And what they do is they do performance marketing, reviewing on different channels, acquiring from X channel. Hey, what is the revenue on that model from that channel? How this is converting well? And again, the other team does is finding more creative. What are the other creative that we make to reduce the cost for CPI, the cost per acquisition? So the product team, it does is improve the LTV, the lifetime value of the product. The growth team does is the reducing the cost or make sure that it holds. So when you launch the product, the CPI scales. So the first user that you acquire is for $1, but the millionth user that you acquire might be at $10. So this is how it scales. So in that case, the goal of the growth team is to make sure that it sustains the CPI, and the product team is to make sure that it start increasing the LTV, so the product, the whole business is more viable. So again, in that case, we do have access to multiple data points for any product. Hey guys, what happened on this product? Can we have the learning? The Line Studio is under AppLovin umbrella. AppLovin has recently acquired Machine Zone. They have acquired a lot of different studios in word space, in tile space, in midcore space. So what we have is we have access to all those developers and asking what are the models they are running, how they're training the teams, and what are the culture they have. What are the process they're running, how they're working in this current time of work from home. So we get access to a lot of other informations that was, to be honest, if you work in silos, it would be possible. It would have taken us around like 5 years to get there. So that is what I actually preferred everyone to work with big studios over here, learn them, and then go with indie rather than starting with indie, and you might do a lot of mistakes. And interestingly, what is happening around here in Pakistan is like I do a lot of people over here, and in gaming industries, we see a lot of people with an entrepreneurial side, and we have seen developers that want to be entrepreneur, but they said, oh, gaming is the best side where I can make my own product, can launch it, can test it, and make the impact in the industry. So I would say, so this industry requires a different mindset overall. And so yeah, I would say Line Studios has been a great journey. I'll still prefer for everyone to at least align with a partner not for the area that is not his strength right now. So typically in Pakistan, publishing is one of the area, where people have started spending in, but again, there's a journey that you have to come up, and definitely in coming years that should be solved. So I would say, yeah, sign up with a partner, and for the areas that you're not good at, learn them and try to test them on your own. Hey guys, we have learned this area. Let's run some IPs on our own and to understand does we have enough learning or not.
Great. I think that's a great sum up, and thank you for sharing those details. So obviously not everyone has $100,000 to experiment in a 2-month time frame, but even on a smaller scale, I think the point is really valid. You can spend 5 years organically, very slowly by yourself, sitting in a silo, learning something, or you can just team up on rev share or profit share or any other sort of arrangement with people in the region. It's not going to be easy if you don't have a track record. Top brands like Lion are not going to talk to you. The reason that Mindstorm was able to do this was because of Babar's history, because of Mindstorm's team's history, and you guys had done years and years of content production that was top class, that sort of gave you that respect and landed you somebody like Lion. But there are hundreds of other companies out there for indie developers as well, and that I think I'd like to conclude by saying that um, the takeaway from this should be that if you can break the silos both locally and internationally, that is the way forward. Whether it's community building, whether it's doing joint projects, whether it's training, whether it's just getting a better understanding of the publishing and the business end. Locally, small teams need to partner with each other. Freelancers and indies need to partner with each other. Smaller teams need to partner with established studios. I know it's not easy, but a lot of them are open to actually working with smaller teams with talent. So I think by default, Pakistanis have a tendency to work in silos, and we need to break that sort of trait of ours and be more open and be more collaborative. Once that starts happening locally, I think just like the Mindstorm Lion example, there are other studios as well who have partnered and even gotten investments and done JVs with international brands coming to Pakistan through them. So I think that is definitely the way forward on how we can at least speed up some of the progress of the overall industry. And generally, things are headed in the right direction. I know they're not as fast as we would like, but if you look at the space 5 years ago, 3 years ago, the space right now is tremendously better and encouraging for everyone in the industry.